Okay, so you're probably wondering what the hell the title is. Well, it's 3 movies, not 1. Each one of these films are films from directors that I absolutely adore. Steven Spielberg, Spike Lee, and John Carpenter. And also, I'm really not going to miss a time to talk about Jurassic Park, because that's one of my all-time favorite movies, and if you didn't know, I have a poster of it hanging up that is signed by the whole cast and crew. It's one of the coolest things I have. Each one of these movies are examples of movies made in the 80s and early 90s that wouldn't be made today outside of A24 or Blumhouse or Monkey Paw or any little studio that allows artistic vision. Okay, so let's start with Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is one of the best action-adventure horror movies. Jurassic Park is one of the best action-adventure sci-fi horror films ever made. You heard me right. It is horror. Tell me the T-Rex escaping, raptors in the kitchen, that's not horror? Tell me that. That is horror. Especially for a young kid, a young me. Because this was a movie that I loved to death, and I still do. I've watched the sequels. I like most of them, except for 2 choice ones, which I'm not going to mention. The thing about this movie is that it was the reason why I got into movies. I remember watching this for the first time and being blown away by the visual effects and wondering in my head, how the heck did they do it? So I was afraid of the movies for a while, so I drifted apart from them, and then I rewatched them later on around middle school. And in middle school, that was when the 4th one was coming out, and I really like that one. It's a lot of fun. When I was a kid, we used to take long car rides well, we still do, to Boston, where my Uncle Rob is. And when I went to his house in the van, which had a DVD player in it, I always liked to watch Jurassic Park, and I watched all 3 of them, and I watched the bonus features over and over and over again, and that was the reason why I got into movies. I wanted to do that. I wanted to make things. I wanted to make movies that people loved and watched over and over again. I wanted to capture that. This film is one of those movies that everyone really should watch. Even if you hate the sequels, you gotta admit the first one's really good. And I am someone that thinks the second movie is just as good as the first. Fight me. I love this movie so much. When it got re-released for its 25th, I think, anniversary, like something around there, 15th or 25th. I saw it in IMAX 3D when it got re-released, and oh my gosh, I never saw it on the big screen, and when I did, it was one of those moments where I'm like, holy cow, this is the magic of movies. And it's one of those movies that only Spielberg could make. And Steven Spielberg has always been an idol for me. I've always loved his work. I thought he's always been the one that I aspire to be. I aspire to be that filmmaker that can go from Jurassic Park to Schindler's List and not hear the score of his movie until the premiere. It's pretty crazy. That movie has a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, like with the hurricane that went through. All that footage of the tropical storm in the movie, that's all real footage from when the hurricane was going through the set in Hawaii. Standouts for me are Sam Neill as Alan Grant. He's the character that I always loved. I do love Malcolm, but I always feel closer to him because I think again, as a kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist, so I identified with him a lot more than Malcolm, because I find Malcolm's a good character, don't get me wrong. Jeff Goldblum. I love Jeff Goldblum. Who doesn't love Jeff Goldblum? But I did think that he's overblown. A lot of people are like, oh, I love Jeff Goldblum, and I'm like, what about the main character, Alan Grant? Other standouts, Laura Dern. I love her. No matter what she's in, she's great. I know this movie so well, I could go line by line with it because I've watched it that many times and I've rewatched it over and over and I love it. It's just one of those movies that just... I love it, and I want to watch it again and again and again. I could talk about this movie for ages, like, honestly, because I'm so passionate about this movie in particular, because it's, again, the movie that made me get into movies and get into the behind the scenes and the VFX work, and Stan Winston, Spielberg, Phil Tippett, everyone. This deserved, like, this is one of those movies that I don't think ever will die. Even if they pump out sequel after sequel after sequel, I don't think that. I think it's one of those movies that just will stand the test of time as one of the best action-adventure movies, one of the best horror hybrids ever, that somehow manages to be family-friendly while also being terrifying. Now, onto Spike Lee's masterpiece, Do the Right Thing. So, Spike Lee's a filmmaker that I always heard about. I never watched many of his films until recently, and my first one of his was Black Klansman, which I love. That movie's hilarious, it's impactful, it's really good, and if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Same thing with any of these movies. Any of these movies I mentioned, go watch them, they're great. When I saw it with my friends in the library. When we had study hall sometimes, we would go into the library and watch movies, and that's what we did. That was the first movie we watched, and I loved it. Everyone loved it. It was a really good time. And when I first watched it, I was hooked by his style and his tone. It's something that a lot of people notice and take a look at. And some people say his is just sizzle, not the steak. But it's not that. I think it's very deliberate. You look at Do the Right Thing, and the whole film is just dripping with heat. Like, you feel this massive heat that somehow you know isn't there, but like you feel that it's there because of the way the camera's set up, the way the colors are done, everything. It's really good. So his iconic film Do the Right Thing was a movie I was meaning to watch for a while, and then I finally did watch it when Criterion was re-releasing and updating it, and I pre-ordered it along with Europa, which is a movie I haven't watched yet, and I have a big backlog of movies I haven't watched. So when I watched it, so when they did that, I couldn't pass that up. I'm like, I gotta pre-order it, and that's one of the only 3 Blu-rays I ever pre-ordered. The other one being Overlord, which is really fun, and I highly recommend it. Yeah. So I watched it, and it quickly became one of those movies that I love, and I think is one of those greatest films of all time. It's basically a modern neo-realistic take on life in Brooklyn, and saying that, it makes sense. It deals with so many topics that can be overwhelming for first-time viewers. Like, it deals with racism, police violence, gentrification, repression, community identity, and so much more. It is slow-paced, don't get me wrong. Yes, the first, like, the 75% of it is slow, but that's the point. It's supposed to get you into this block of a neighborhood. This whole film takes place in one block of Brooklyn, and you are basically an observer, and you observe everything through Mookie, the main character, who's played by Spike Lee. And the ending is so like that you just, it's one of those endings that will stick with you, and it's something, and I'm not going to give it away. It's something that you have to experience for yourself, and if you don't like the movie, that's okay. But if you do, yeah. One criticism that I do find, that I come across every now and again, is that it doesn't have a point. But at the same time, that's the point. The point of the film is to show what a day in the life of one of these blocks could be, with the heat and the tension rising with everyone, and especially during this, a black neighborhood with one white pizza shop guy that could end up messy, and that's what happens. One of the criticisms that I absolutely fucking hate is that this film is racist towards white people. I know. Yes, I just hate that, because if you think it's racist towards white people, you missed the whole point. It's to show people, hey, this is happening. This is a problem. We have to do something about it. And even with that, they're like, some people say all the white characters are painted as evil. Then why? And my response to that is, why the hell is Vito there? He is not racist like his father and brother. He is someone that just seems like he's trying to live his life, and he's trying to at least be good. And yes, he knows racism is bad, and he shouldn't learn from his father and his brother, but like, the whole point he's there, the whole point of his character is to show not all white people are bad. And that whole criticism is moot because of that character. And Spike Lee doesn't think that all white people are racist. Go look at Black Klansmen and stuff. Like yes, there are white supremacists in that movie, but Adam Driver's character and the rest of the police department, except for the one dude, they're all good. So Spike Lee isn't racist to white people, and people need to learn that. And another stupid criticism is that if a white director made this, he would be called racist, and I don't agree with that. I think that if a white director did make this, it would turn out something very shallow, like Green Book or Driving Miss Daisy, or anything like that, where it has one of those racism is solved endings. And this movie doesn't. It subverts that by, in the end, showing that racism is always going to be there, and yes, we have to do something about that, but like, it's something that won't change overnight. It's going to take time and effort and just a lot of work. The film doesn't sugarcoat anything. It tells you as it is. It's basically a sledgehammer, but it's effective.
And that's the root.
If it was a white director, it wouldn't have as much staying power as it has. It has almost all African-American cast, all African-American crew, African-American director and writer. And imagine that at the time, the mostly white Hollywood and this one African-American group comes in, knocks down the door and says, hey, we have something to say. We have things to say, and we have stories to tell. Sorry if I got into the discussion of this film a little too much. I feel like it's one of those movies that we should watch and interpret, because it's one of those movies that doesn't get made as often as it should. Yes, you get your Green Books and your Driving Miss Daisies and all that every now and again, but not from an African-American director, not from someone like that. And yes, we have Barry Jenkins and we have Ryan Coogler, but still, it's a very underrepresented group in general in film. Okay, things I love about this film is, again, formerly mentioned, the heat that drips off the screen. You can feel it, you can taste it, like, it's great. The Dutch angles help with the style and meaning of each of the scenes that they're used in. They help to create tension and other things like that, and that's really cool. The characters are deep and interesting. We get to know each of them and what their relationships are in the community, and the whole film centers around that community and what happens about it. Radio Raheem, one of the best characters in the movie. He is, if you know what happens to him, he's one of those characters that you really do feel bad about and feel sad about, because he's kind of a gentle giant, and I think that Spike Lee does a very, very good job with the writing of characters in this movie. Yes, this film has pacing issues, the whole 75% of it being slow and then speeding up at the end. Yes, some people can take that as a negative. I don't. I think it helps enforce the point of the movie. But I have to move on now. I've spent most of the time on this movie, so I'm going to move on. And finally, it's time for Big Trouble in Little China. This film was directed by John Carpenter, the director of The Thing, Halloween, Christine, They Live, Escape from New York, and a ton of other 80s classics. The thing about his films overall is they're not for everyone. I love The Thing. My mom likes it. I love Big Trouble in Little China. My mom hates it. And the whole divisiveness of his films it's interesting because there's clearly some competency behind the camera and the writing and the acting and all that, and it's all very, very well done. It's just some people don't click with it, and that's okay. He's still one of my favorite directors of all time. His genre films are unparalleled compared to what's made today. The sad thing about him is he wasn't popular back in the day. He was just another director, and the thing about it is a lot of his popularity has come recently, especially with the cult followings of The Thing and Big Trouble and all of his other movies. Most of them were panned by critics. And people love them, and I love them. I think they're competent films that are both funny, scary, and have some kick-ass scores. And one of the films that is getting reevaluated is Big Trouble in Little China. Originally panned by critics and audiences, the film has gone on to create a cult following. And what Carpenter says happened is the reason why it wasn't such a big hit was because of Fox. And Fox and their inability to market it. Because originally, the film, they wanted just a comedy kung fu movie. But no, Carpenter gave you a comedy, creature feature kung fu movie with mystical elements and crazy set pieces. That should have worked. You get a popular star as well. That should have worked. But it didn't. That's the thing that I hate about Carpenter's career. His movies were so good, but they didn't click. And I wish they did. Thankfully, he's getting a lot of appreciation for his work today, and especially this movie, because it's now being known as one of the funniest action comedies this side of Jump Street. Kurt Russell plays the side character of another movie, put in the lead role of this. If that sounds silly, I think it's your movie. But if it sounds stupid or weird, I still think you'll get a kick out of it. His whole character is, again, he's the sidekick. He's the one that stays out of the action. And all this stuff is going on around him, and he's like, what the heck is going on? The action is energetic and fun. The jokes are funny. They never seem overused or overblown or anything like a bad comedy would. Each joke is funny and different. The creature effects are awesome and different, and I always love John Carpenter creatures because you're always in for a treat. The Thing, oh my god, there's some amazing visual effects in that movie. And this one, especially, this one has some really cool creatures in it. And some of them don't get explained, but I really don't care. I don't care that they don't get explained. I think they're cool, and honestly, more randomness for this movie, the better. Something Carpenter has always been known for is his amazing scores. And especially with this one, it's one of my personal top favorites. My favorite being the newest Halloween movie. That score is, again, this is just a fun movie that I enjoy. Some people won't, and that's okay. To close, I want to talk about why I chose to do these 3 movies instead of 1, like normal. 1, it was the assignment, and I really couldn't choose. But 2, because these 2 films kind of encapsulate the 80s and early 90s. During that time, you had some amazing films come out, like Nightmare on Elm Street, Aliens, Alien 3, Goodfellas, Silence of the Lambs, Scarface, RoboCop, Full Metal Jacket, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Back to the Future, Stand By Me, Ghostbusters, Princess Bride, Dark Crystal, The Labyrinth, Neverending Story, Blade Runner, E.T., Empire Strikes Back, American Werewolf in London, Friday the 13th, Pulp Fiction, and many more that just I can't go through. I think personally, 80s and early 90s was a time that film could freely run. They had the ability to make what they want to. You had everything from indies to big budget movies, and those big budget movies were really good. I'm not knocking today's big budget movies, but there's a magic that those movies had. There's something about them. There's something that makes them so good or so fun. In my humble opinion, yes, we're in that 80s and 90s renaissance right now. I get that, but I think that it's deserved. I don't think we'll ever have another decade like this, like the 80s or the 90s, with this amount of movies that come out and just knock it out of the park. And these three films show the diversity of the time. One, you have a big action-adventure movie, the other, an indie film about African Americans, and then the third one, an action-adventure comedy. Every film out there at this time was different and unique and something that people have never seen before. I dare you to Google that stuff, Google up 80s and 90s movies, and you just will scroll and see so many classics of the time. And I'm not saying that this decade or the previous one didn't have good movies. It did. It had some solid efforts. It's just there's something about movies from that time. The quality and the quantity of movies about that is something magical that I don't think ever will be brought again. So I hope you enjoyed this. This is going to be my last one of these, and for a little bit. I want to continue doing these after the fact, so if you want to subscribe, I guess, I don't know. I'm going to do more of these hopefully, and yeah, please stay safe, stay healthy, and have a good day.